This is the second part of our video series on the forms of government in different countries around the world. In the first part, we talked about the number of countries in the world, UN member countries, non-member observer states like the Holy See and the State of Palestine, and non-UN member countries. We also discussed democracy and republic as forms of government. If you haven't watched the first part yet, I recommend you do so for more information. In this video, we will be discussing the other forms of government. Republic, a system of elected representatives. A republic is a form of government where power is vested in elected representatives who act on behalf of the people. Unlike a monarchy, where power is inherited, republics are characterized by a system of checks and balances that prevents any single individual or group from accumulating absolute power. Examples of republican countries include United States, France, Germany, India, Brazil, Russia, China. Electoral processes in republics. The specific mechanisms for electing representatives vary across republics. In some cases, citizens directly elect representatives to legislative bodies, while in others, they elect individuals who then form a college of electors to choose the head of state. Qualifications for contesting elections. The qualifications for contesting elections in a republic typically include citizenship, a minimum age requirement, and residency within the relevant jurisdiction. Additional qualifications may be based on education, experience, or party affiliation. Election funding in republics. Election funds in republics are primarily raised from individual contributions, party funds, and public funding mechanisms. Individual contributions are voluntary donations made by citizens to support candidates or parties of their choice. Party funds are generated through membership dues, fundraising events, and investments. Public funding, where applicable, is allocated to political parties based on their electoral performance. Taxability of election funds. The question of whether election funds are taxable depends on the specific country's tax laws. In some cases, individual contributions may be eligible for tax deductions or credits. However, party funds and public funding are generally considered non-taxable income. Transparency and accountability are crucial aspects of democratic governance in republics. Political parties and candidates are usually required to disclose their sources of funding and the amounts received. This information is typically made public through election commissions or authorized bodies. The Right to Information (RTI) Act empowers citizens to access information held by public authorities, fostering informed decision-making and combating corruption. The RTI Act is prevalent in many major republics around the world, including United States. The Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) grants individuals the right to request access to records from federal agencies. France, the law No. 774 of the 6th of January 1978 on access to information, computer files and liberties. Access to Information Law provides individuals with the right to access information held by public authorities. Germany, the Act on Access to Information, Informationszugangsgesetz (IFG), grants individuals the right to request access to information held by public authorities. India, the Right to Information Act, 2005, empowers citizens to seek information from any public authority. Brazil, the Access to Information Act, Lei de Acesso à Informação, LAI, grants individuals the right to request access to information held by government agencies. Russia, the Federal Law, No. 142 FZ of the 27th of July 2006, on access to information provides individuals with the right to request access to information held by public authorities. China, the Government Information Disclosure Regulations, GIDR, provide individuals with the right to request access to information held by government agencies. While republics and democracies share some similarities, there are also key distinctions between the two forms of government. In a democracy, the power of decision-making ultimately lies with the people, while in a republic, power is vested in elected representatives who act on behalf of the people. Countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, India, and Germany are often classified as both democracies and republics due to their hybrid nature. While they have democratic elements such as the rule of law, free elections, and protection of individual rights, they also have republican elements, such as the separation of powers and the election of representatives to act on behalf of the people. The United Kingdom's political system is particularly intricate. combining elements of democracy, republic, and monarchy. It is a constitutional monarchy, meaning that the monarch is the head of state, but does not hold absolute power. The United Kingdom also has a parliamentary system, where the government is led by the Prime Minister, who is typically the leader of the majority party in the House of Commons. Republics represent a diverse and dynamic form of government, embodying the principles of representation, checks and balances, and accountability. By empowering citizens to elect their representatives and ensuring transparency in governance. A monarchy is a form of government in which the head of state is a monarch. Monarchs are typically hereditary rulers, meaning that they inherit their position from their parents. Monarchies can be either absolute or constitutional. In an absolute monarchy, the monarch has absolute power. In a constitutional monarchy, the monarch's powers are limited by a constitution. Examples of monarchical countries include United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Japan, Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. A monarchy is a form of government where the head of state, typically a king or queen, holds their position by virtue of hereditary succession. Unlike republics and democracies, where power is derived from the people or elected representatives, monarchies are characterized by a hereditary line of rulers who pass down their sovereignty to their heirs. In a monarchy, the qualification for becoming the head of state is determined by birthright. The monarch's heir, typically their eldest child, automatically assumes the throne upon the monarch's death or abdication. This hereditary system ensures continuity and stability in the monarchy. Election funds in monarchies typically come from the monarch's personal wealth, government coffers, or a combination of both. In some cases, the monarchy may also receive funding from private sources or public donations. The question of whether election funds in monarchies are taxable depends on the specific country's tax laws. In some cases, the monarch's personal wealth may be subject to taxes, while government funds may be exempt from taxation. The level of transparency and contribution declaration in monarchies varies depending on the country and its political culture. In some monarchies, the monarch's finances may be largely opaque, while others may have more transparency measures in place. The Right to Information (RTI) Act is not as prevalent in monarchies as it is in democracies and republics. This is partly due to the traditional power dynamics and the hereditary nature of monarchical systems. However, there are some monarchies that have implemented RTI laws or provisions. Monarchies and democracies differ significantly in their approach to governance and power distribution. In a monarchy, power is concentrated in the hands of the monarch, while in a democracy, power is ultimately held by the people. Monarchy, hereditary rule, head of state, king or queen. Power concentrated in the monarch, limited role for elected representatives. Democracy, rule of law, free and fair elections. Power held by the people. Elected representatives act on behalf of the people. Distinguishing monarchies from democracies. While some monarchies may incorporate democratic elements such as elections and representative bodies, the fundamental distinction lies in the source of power. In a monarchy, power ultimately resides with the monarch, regardless of the democratic elements present. Monarchies in the modern world. Monarchies continue to exist in various forms around the world, adapting to changing political landscapes and evolving societal expectations. While the traditional concept of absolute monarchy has largely faded, many constitutional monarchies have found a balance between monarchical tradition and democratic principles. Conclusion. Monarchies represent a fascinating and enduring form of government, steeped in history and tradition. While they face challenges in adapting to modern democratic ideals, they continue to hold a significant place in the global political landscape. Dictatorship, a rule of unrestrained power. A dictatorship is a form of government where a single ruler or a small group of rulers holds absolute power. Dictators typically come to power through force or coercion, and they often use repression and intimidation to maintain their grip on power. Examples of dictatorial countries include North Korea, Syria, Cuba, Venezuela, Belarus, Eritrea, Turkmenistan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. Representatives in dictatorships. In a dictatorship, representatives are typically appointed by the dictator or their inner circle. These representatives may hold positions in the government, the military, or other key institutions, but they do not have any real power to challenge the dictator's authority. Qualifications for contesting elections. Elections in dictatorships are often sham elections, where the outcome is predetermined to ensure the dictator's victory. In some cases, there may be no elections at all. Election funds in dictatorships. Election funds in dictatorships are typically controlled by the dictator or their inner circle. These funds may come from government coffers, private sources, or both. Taxability of election funds. The question of whether election funds in dictatorships are taxable is moot, as these funds are typically not subject to any formal taxation or auditing. Transparency and contribution declaration. Transparency and contribution declaration are virtually non-existent in dictatorships. The dictator and their inner circle have complete control over the flow of funds and information, and there are no mechanisms for public scrutiny or accountability. The Right to Information Act is not prevalent in dictatorships. Freedom of information is severely curtailed in these regimes, and citizens are often denied access to information about government activities. Dictatorships and democracies stand in stark contrast to each other. Dictatorships are characterized by absolute power, lack of transparency and repression, while democracies are characterized by rule of law, free and fair elections, and protection of individual rights. Rule by a single dictator or small group. Absolute power, limited or no elections, repression and intimidation, lack of transparency and accountability. Rule of law, free and fair elections, power held by the people. Elected representatives act on behalf of the people. Protection of individual rights and freedoms. Dictatorships continue to persist in various forms around the world, despite the global trend towards democracy. These regimes often face challenges in maintaining their grip on power, as citizens increasingly demand greater freedom and accountability. Dictatorships represent a stark contrast to democratic ideals, characterized by absolute power, repression, and lack of transparency. While they remain a persistent force in global politics, they face mounting challenges from citizens yearning for greater freedoms and democratic principles. Anarchy is a state of lawlessness or political disorder brought about by the absence of governmental authority. It is a system without a supreme ruler or a hierarchical governing structure. In an anarchic society, individuals are considered to be self-governing and autonomous. Since there is no central government in an anarchy, there are no elected representatives or formal elections. Decisions are typically made through consensus building or direct democracy, where individuals participate directly in decision-making processes. In the absence of a formal government, funding for various initiatives in an anarchical society is typically voluntary and community-based. Individuals or groups may contribute resources based on their own interests and abilities. As there is no government to impose taxes, the concept of taxation does not exist in an anarchy. Individuals are responsible for managing their own finances and contributing to community projects as they see fit. Transparency and accountability in an anarchy are based on voluntary mechanisms and informal community norms. Individuals are expected to be open about their actions and decisions, and there may be informal systems of dispute resolution to address conflicts. The Right to Information Act is not applicable in an anarchy, as there is no formal government to provide access to information. However, individuals are free to seek and share information as they see fit. Anarchy and democracy represent opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of governmental structure and power distribution. In a democracy, power is held by the people and exercised through elected representatives, while in an anarchy, there is no central government and powers is distributed among individuals. Absence of central government, self-governance and autonomy, consensus building or direct democracy, voluntary funding and contributions, no taxation, transparency and accountability based on community norms, no Right to Information Act, rule of law, free and fair elections, power held by the people, elected representatives act on behalf of the people, protection of individual rights and freedoms. Each form of government has its own set of advantages and disadvantages. Merits, rule of law and protection of individual rights, representation and participation of citizens, accountability and transparency of government. Demerits, potential for political gridlock and inefficiency, influence of money and special interests, challenges in addressing complex and long-term issues. Merits, separation of powers and checks and balances, representation of citizens through elected officials, potential for stability and continuity. Demerits, risk of power concentration in the hands of the executive branch, potential for political gridlock and bureaucracy, challenges in ensuring representation of minority groups. Merits: potential for stability and continuity, preservation of traditions and cultural identity, symbolic role of the monarch can unite the country. Demerits: concentration of power in the hands of the monarch, limited participation of citizens in decision-making, potential for conflicts between the monarch and other branches of government. Merits: swift and decisive action in times of crisis, potential for rapid economic development, order and stability in the absence of political opposition. Demerits: suppression of individual rights and freedoms, lack of accountability and transparency, risk of abuse of power and corruption. Merits: individual freedom and self-governance, absence of centralized authority and bureaucracy, potential for innovation. Demerits: vulnerability to chaos and violence, lack of infrastructure and public services, difficulties in resolving conflicts and enforcing norms. Conclusion: the choice of government system is a complex and multifaceted decision that depends on a variety of factors, including historical context, cultural values, economic conditions, and social structures. Each form of government has its own strengths and weaknesses, and the optimal system may vary depending on the specific circumstances of a country. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of various forms of governments of the world. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more engaging and informative content on political systems around the world.